this out of the way. Car launches generally suck. Teams are not suddenly going to change from blue liveries to 14 shades of purple, and most of us haven't got the intense levels of aerodynamic and chassis knowledge to break down changes on a pixel level year to year. I'm not Sam Collins, he rocks by the way, and will never try to be. However, sometimes when reading between some of the lines by the drivers at these press conferences, you do get some interesting tidbits, and we've had 2 of them drop in the last 24 hours or so. First up, Daniel Ricciardo, more specifically his new McLaren contract. Turns out it's a 3-year deal. A smart move because if he's on the rumoured 8 figures he's getting in orange, that takes him beyond the proposed 2023 salary cap, so his money in his prime is guaranteed. It also means that Ricciardo is most likely going to be an orange into his age 35 season, meaning this will probably be his last chance at a major title. Ricciardo is a blatant case of F1's FOMO, the fear of missing out. He got the big bump over John-Eric Vergne in 2014, immediately beat Sebastian Vettel and had people like Eddie Jordan say he'd be the next guy to build a team around, a genuine Driver of the Year candidate in 2014 and 2016. We underestimated how great Mercedes would be in the end, maybe overestimated Red Bull's development, and then his employers got gooey-eyed for Max Verstappen, the real next big thing in Formula 1. Ricciardo wasn't stupid, knew the writing was on the wall, and bailed. Problem was, no one else in the field besides Mercedes had a race-winning car, and that problem still kinda stands now. McLaren is the borderline 3rd to 4th best car in the field. No one's really broken the V6 hybrid era status quo besides Williams, and they fell down the order when the money dried up. I know the Woking squad are aiming to close that gap, but that gap is a vast, gaping chasm. One of my favourite people in this space, Jess McFadden, said a phrase that stuck with me once. Quote, "Good drivers get the top seats, great drivers keep them." It's a phrase I absolutely agree with, but Ricciardo might be the walking exception because he didn't want to play second fiddle to a Verstappen-led Red Bull. Seriously, don't give it too much thought for a second. How many guys in the sport do you actually take over Daniel Ricciardo? I can only definitively say 2. Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen. Maybe Charles Leclerc. You'd have to try very hard to convince me into anyone else. It'd be a darn shame if his prime years amounted to bits and pieces, like being an upper midfielder tends to, because Danny Ric is absolutely a cut above that. Then there's Lando Norris spitting some hot takes. He spoke about what his new teammate will bring to the table, and it got a lot of people's dander up. Now, credit to Philip Duncan at Yahoo Sports for the following quote. "I don't think the arrival of Daniel will make it any harder for me. I worked with Carlos, who's an extremely good driver, and there are things Carlos is going to be better at than Daniel and vice versa. I don't think Daniel is a big step above anything that Carlos has achieved, and there is more pressure on him because he has been in Formula 1 for longer and has to come in and perform very well. It is harder for someone to go up against a much younger driver than it is for a younger driver going up against someone with more experience. I'm in that earlier phase of my career, but I still need to perform very well, and there are no excuses for me anymore." A lot of people saw these comments from Lando as cocky, arrogant, or disrespectful of Ricciardo and what he brings to the table. Not me. If anything, it was probably an endorsement of Carlos Sainz, his former teammate with who he got along so well with in the 2 years since he debuted. Sure, on the most obvious of metrics, Lando is 0-2 against Carlos Sainz. But last year he was a rookie, and this year he was only 8 points behind the Spaniard and has out-qualified him in both seasons to date. If Lando on current form is this close to Carlos Sainz, a guy comfortably in the upper half of how we look at drivers in the field in 2021, I'm not sure how much more you want from your 21-year-old Year 2 newbie. Lando Norris is objectively really, really good. If anything, he's a victim of coming into a sport that had 2 S-tier prospects tick every box and politically climb the ranks way faster than usual. Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc were incredible prospects and were in elite machinery by year 2 of their careers. By most measures, that ain't normal. Really, Lewis Hamilton is about the only guy in this era that has had that set of circumstances. The bar has been raised in terms of younger drivers and what they're meant to be capable of these days. I fear what's happened here is that the personality-centric world we look at F1's drivers with is having an effect on how we evaluate them on the track as well. Lando Norris is quickly becoming one of the sport's most divisive figures. As cliche as it sounds, it makes sense. He's a very new entity in F1's world. He Twitch streams, he has his own brand on YouTube with the Excellent Team Quadrant, he's rubbed shoulders with the Sidemen, he doesn't take himself too seriously most of the time, and when he is serious, he still has that confidence in himself that we associate with other elite athletes. And he's not been afraid to rock the boat like he did the other day. Don't let the tweeting fool you, he's as steely a competitor as anyone out there. He's the mascot for a lot of F1's new viewers in the last couple of seasons, and a figure of frustration for the gatekeeping old guard. When you're cynical, you're more likely to blur the lines between on and off track and think worse of him by proxy. In reality, Lando's one of the highest value drivers in the field right now, and if anything, he knows he needs to step up because he's not going to get the same level of slack in year 3 of his career. And if anything, Daniel Ricciardo is a great barometer to see where he's actually at. The same goes for Carlos Sainz, and look, I'll be the first to tell you what I think of him off the track. Trust me, it involves licking a certain item of clothing, but purely from on the track, he's made the most of pretty much every hand he's been dealt in Formula 1 to date. Debuting and holding his own against Verstappen in Toro Rosso, making the team his own after his departure, and leading McLaren's reboot as they've climbed out of the doldrums of mediocrity. Little we forget, Carlos walked away from Red Bull's umbrella, a team that would absolutely have given him a shot by now if he'd stuck around. That takes some cojones to bet against yourself, especially when Ricciardo did the same thing 2 years ago, and you could make the case that he hasn't really justified that move yet. Sure, he doesn't have the validation that Ricciardo's had with his half-decade in race-winning machinery, but Carlos has been tipped for this level of seat for a while now and has a good chance of being in one if Ferrari improves and they don't pull political shenanigans. The Scuderia genuinely has an argument to having the best driver lineup in the sport now, and their matchup is one of the most fascinating going into 2021. If anything, so is McLaren's. I can understand why Lando would think they're close, and I can understand that talent evaluation is really hard in a sport where politics, timing, and the strength of the car are just as a determining factor for success, more than we've ever given credit for in the cult of personality era that Formula 1's in now. Damn, I really just spent the better part of 8 minutes talking about a car launch. Guess they don't suck so bad after all, huh?